I'm speaking into this little black recorder because there's a chance I won't walk out of tonight with a pulse. If that happens, I want something left, more than a blood stain in the file folder with my name stamped along the spine. A voice can travel further than a body. My name is Chris Smith, Homicide, Jackson PD. 12 years on the job, a clearance rate they like to bring up at award luncheons when they need someone to take a photo with a stale sheet cake and a brass plaque. Around the bullpen, they call me Preacher, which is a joke that stuck, even though I never learned how to pray. My father did. He wore a thin silver cross that followed him from his first construction site to his last day, when the breath rattled in his chest like nails in a coffee can. He pressed that cross into my palm and made me promise I'd never take it off. I told him yes, because dying men become children again, and I couldn't bear to disappoint the child behind his eyes. I wear it still, though I keep tugging the chain under my collar when I catch it gleaming in the mirror. It feels like a prop I never earned. Last Thursday, the case came down. That's where it starts for you. For me, it started a long time ago, long before a girl's body cooled on stone, long before a basement swallowed the echo of a scream. But you need a door to step through, so take this one. The call: young female, early 20s, found in the basement of an abandoned church off Canal Road outside Vicksburg. Patrol had processed the scene. The body was already at the coroner's by the time the file hit my desk. The initial report read neat as a sermon. No signs of forced entry, no clear trauma, no blood. Apparent sudden death, which is a phrase that means we ran out of words, not that we found the truth. The morgue felt colder than usual that night. Stainless steel, tile, fluorescent tubes that buzzed like angry insects. The coroner, Dr. was out on a house call, so the tech let me into the viewing room. I walked the slow circle anyone trained to see learns to walk. She lay under a sheet, pale where the sheet ended, younger even than the report guessed, 20, maybe 21, blonde, eyes closed, mouth slightly parted, like a breath had been interrupted rather than ended. No petechia, no bruises under the jawline, nails clean, no scent of liquor, no chemical bite of vomit, just the deodorized blankness of death. I dragged a chair from the wall and sat, letting my pupils squeeze down against the hospital glare. Sometimes your eyes start telling the truth only when you stop demanding it. That's when I saw them. 2 faint pinpoints on the left side of her neck, a whisper of symmetry. The kind of marks that live at the edge of your vision, which means they might be nothing, lint, glare, wishful thinking, or the whole story disguised as a rumor. I stood, leaned in with my penlight. The tiny beads of shadow on her skin receded, as if embarrassed. I blinked, and they were not there at all. Smooth, ordinary, nothing. Lighting, the tech offered from the doorway, like a waiter suggesting the fish. Maybe, I said, and pretended to believe it. The church squats on a wedge of land where the road forgets itself and narrows to a stubborn strip. St. Bridget's, the records say, though nobody has been holy in there for 3 decades. The brick shell still remembers where the windows once let in colored light. Now the panes are only jagged arches that the sky stares through. Wind has a way with empty places down here. It threads Spanish moss through rusted gutters, teaches doors to speak in long-drawn groans, drags the scent of water and iron through your coat. By the time I parked, daylight had slid to rust. The horizon wore the last orange like a bruise, and the church rose in silhouette, a tooth chipped down to the root. I pushed the oak doors with the emblem of a lost cross carved into them, the hinges complaining in a voice that went straight to the spine. Inside smelled like dust after rain, and something older, a sweetness that had rotted. Stone saints leaned tiredly in their niches, faces sanded by time into patient blanks. The nave was a dim corridor of shadows and echo. You learn the grammar of emptiness on this job, the way a hollow place answers you back, the way it asks questions without words. The stairwell hid behind the chancel, a narrow spiral carved into stone that hadn't forgotten the hands that wore it down. My flashlight blinked its low battery stutter, a dying star. I cursed my own habit of trusting a half-charge and kept going. Down there, the air cooled a full season, the kind of cold that isn't temperature so much as agreement, a place and the darkness inside it, reaching a pact not to let go of what they hold. The basement door was oak, heavy enough to remember every palm that had pushed against it. A cross once lived there, chiseled into the center. Someone, sometime, had gouged it out with something not quite sharp enough. Ragged cuts, deep and furious, like anger that had to settle for splinters. I shoved, and the door moved, the way old grudges do, inch by stubborn inch. Yellow tape draped the room like party streamers from a party no one should ever throw. The chalk outline still ghosted the stone, a pale shape where the body's heat had drained. I ducked the tape and squatted by the outline, set my palm where her heartbeat had the decency to stop, closed my eyes. Not because I'm a man of visions, but because sometimes sight drowns out the senses you need more. And the first thing that came wasn't hers. It was mine. Pine needles under my palms, sap stubborn on my skin, the air thick as syrup. Mississippi, late afternoon. Cicadas drilling the heat into a single scream. Footsteps behind me before I heard them. I knew them because they've always been there. Because boys with the same haircuts have been stepping out from behind trees since trees learned to cast shade. 3 of them. Taller, older. Their faces, the map of a town where my street had no name. The first word lands harder than the first fist. That's a physics nobody writes down, but every black kid here learns before algebra. The word flattens you just enough so the punch doesn't have to work as hard. My body remembers the choreography. Head yanked sideways by the collar, knee finding the soft of my stomach, breath choosing escape, dirt in my mouth, a taste of iron that might be mine or the earth's. One leaned close enough for me to count the pores on his nose. "You don't belong here," he said, in a voice that wanted to be gentle and wasn't. That voice stayed with me longer than the bruise. There's a thing in certain throats, hatred dressed up as a lullaby. I opened my eyes in the basement. Sweat made the collar of my shirt itch under the chain. The flashlight flickered again, then steadied, like it had decided to hold on for my sake. I made myself stand. Searching is a way of breathing when breath doesn't come easy. In the corner, half buried in silted dust, something caught the light and refused to give it back. I brushed the dirt away with a gloved knuckle. A cross. Silver, if silver could blister. The metal was warped and blackened, as if held in a blue-white flame, until it remembered it was mortal. I lifted it into an evidence bag, and my fingers tingled with a cold that felt personal. Along the far wall, in a place where the lamplight was more suggestion than fact, letters had been scratched into stone with something stubborn. Afsane. I copied them into my notebook, all angles and uncertainty, and backed toward the stairs because I wanted to be above ground and didn't feel like making a case for it to myself. Home is a one-story box I tell people I like because I chose it. The truth is, it's the only house that never talked back when I stopped at the curb. At my desk, the burnt cross lay on a legal pad like a verdict. I turned it over with the eraser end of a pencil. The warping made it look like it had been asked to hold too much. Funny how metal and men share a language when heat gets involved. The letters in my notebook started to itch at the edges. I tried anagrams like a crossword addict at midnight. Then the cleanest idea occurred to me last. Mirrors sometimes tell the truth we pretend to be looking for. I wrote it backward, Nosferatu. If you're expecting me to say I laughed, I won't. I didn't. Folklore ain't what stops your heart. What did it was the bone-deep recognition that the basement hadn't just described a monster in a word. It had left its calling card, the way certain men in my childhood left a boot print on my ribs. Not enough to kill, enough to teach. I slept badly. When I dreamed, the cross my father gave me felt heavier. In the morning, I wore it anyway. Habit is the softest handcuff. The file on the girl, her name was Emily Parks, held less than the lines on her palm might have. A part-time cashier at a drugstore on Clay, a part-time sophomore at Hines Community. A part-time life, adding up to something that should have had full-time promise. No priors, no known enemies, a roommate who said she wasn't dating anyone serious. Not an angel, the roommate told the officer who took her statement, but not trouble either. That's the kind of epitaph living people offer the dead like it's better than silence. I drove to the church again that afternoon to walk the grounds in daylight. Sun turns certain places honest and embarrasses others. St. Bridget's didn't notice the difference. Vines shouldered their way up the buttresses as if to pull the building back into the dirt it came from. A pair of crows clung to the bell tower aperture and looked down like landlords. The homeless man who'd called it in, name of Lonnie according to the report, had left no forwarding address, which is how addresses work when a man carries his home in his pockets. I found the makeshift pallet tucked in the choir loft. The newspaper spread under it as thin insulation against old wood. There were empty beer cans and a hand-rolled cigarette that had died without help. No sign of blood. No sign of anything except the fact that people choose high places when they need to convince themselves they can see danger coming. Back at my car, I called Alvarez. "Run a tox panel and a full spectrum on Emily," I said. Heavy metals, exotics, the alphabet soup. Call me if anything even whispers. You got it, he said, and paused. Police folklore says you get the weird ones. I get the late ones, I said, and hung up. The word on the wall nagged, like an insect. You hear, but can't find. Nosferatu is a movie poster, more than a scripture verse. But the scratched-out cross on the door, the burnt one in my evidence bag, the twin pinpricks that existed only when I wasn't looking, these pieces didn't add to a story I could tell out loud without losing the room. The room in question, of course, was me. Night came back, as it will, and with it the quiet a city keeps only for the hours it forgets it's a city. I sat on my bed and turned my father's cross between my fingers until the chain bit a thin red line into my skin. He never told me why he wore it, only that a man needs something he agrees with before the dark decides to speak first. I never asked him what the dark had said to him. Some questions either arrive late or never at all. I went back to St. Bridget's close to midnight, because studying your fear at noon is like reading a recipe when you're not hungry. The parking lot held my car the way a wide mouth holds a last tooth. I killed the engine and listened to the kind of silence that lets you hear your own blood move. The moon had climbed barely high enough to look over the roofline. Inside, the nave was a tunnel. I did not put on my flashlight until the stairwell, because sometimes a beam makes a tunnel more real. Halfway down the steps, my hand brushed the stone where the wall tightened. The cold under my palm felt awake. I told myself that was geology and kept moving. The basement waited the way an answer waits for the right question. My light moved across the walls. Dust floated like tired planets. The chalk outline held its shape, the way the negative space of a life holds itself a little while out of habit. The far wall with the word, I walked toward it as if it had asked me to. Letters were letters, but this time something else. A set of parallel scratches beneath the word, like a tally made with impatience, 4 vertical strokes and a slanted 5th crossing them out. 5. I hadn't seen them yesterday. Either the angle of my light had lied to me, or the room was more generous tonight. Or the tally was new. Who did you count? I asked the wall, which is not a sentence to put in a report. A sound moved behind me. Not footsteps, not a drip, a throat, trying to remember how to imitate breath. I turned and the beam swam over stone, found nothing except more of it. I stood long enough for my heartbeat to embarrass itself, then longer, until the embarrassment knelt and asked to be fear. I refused the kneeling and holstered the light for a moment, letting the dark draw a map of the room for me. People forget that your ears can see. That's when I heard it, the smallest chime. Metal against stone, a note almost too thin for the air to carry. My hand went to the cross at my collar without asking my permission. I don't know if I expected it to be hot or cold. I only know it had weight it didn't before. I pulled the light again and scanned. The beam found a glimmer near the base of the door, the one with the gouged-out cross. I walked toward it and saw the smear mark where something had been dragged, not heavy, not light. A line in dust that bent in a slow curve toward the center of the room and vanished where the chalk outline began. I crouched. The line was fresh enough that the dust on either side hadn't settled back. "You don't belong here," someone said, almost kindly, in a voice from long ago. My mouth filled with pine and dirt. I knew it wasn't the boys in the woods. The room knows what hurts you and learns the shape of your scar. My phone vibrated. The sound made the air jump. On the screen, a text from Alvarez. "Call me, now." I climbed the stairs faster than I should have, which is to say at the speed of a man who had decided to let his bravado rest its legs. In the nave, I called. "Tox is clean," he said. "No ethanol, no benzos, no opiates, no designer alphabet, nothing. But two things you're going to want. First, subcutaneous petechia in the lower eyelids we missed at initial, light, but present. Hypoxia signature. Choking. No bruising of the hyoid, no damage consistent with manual strangulation or ligature. Second thing, microabrasions clustered on the left side of the neck. 2 primary points spaced less than a centimeter apart, radiating pattern. They weren't visible under normal light. Under oblique, and after rehydration, there they were. "Bite?" I asked, because there are only so many ways to walk toward a laugh without committing to it. "If it is, it's the neatest dental work I've ever seen." The moon had cleared the roof line. The empty saints watched me from their niches like absent jurors. "Time of death window hold?" "As best as it can," Alvarez said. "Between midnight and 2. Pulmonary edema consistent with asphyxial event without mechanical obstruction. Something stole her air and never laid a hand on her." After we hung up, I stood in that nave so long the moon changed its mind about what angle it liked. Somewhere outside, a dog barked and then remembered it didn't want to, and the night closed over the sound like water over a thrown stone. I touched the cross at my collar again and said nothing to it. On the way home, I drove the route with the windows down, letting the humid dark come in and sit in the passenger seat. My block slept. My porch light tried for courage. Inside, I put the recorder on the desk, pressed the red button, and told it what I'm telling you now. I'll be going back to St. Bridget's tomorrow night, and if I don't come back, the tally under the word on the wall will make sense to someone who counts for a living. If you're listening because you found this rather than because I handed it to you, don't be a hero. Heroes are just people who run out of exits. I don't think the thing in that basement cares about my badge. I'm not convinced it cares about my name, but I suspect it cares that I wear a cross I didn't earn, and that once, in a pine wood where the heat was a knife, 3 boys taught me a lesson about belonging I still haven't unlearned. And I suspect it likes the sound of breath when it stops.